When we don't feel properly heard or understood, it sets us off.
You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Elephants. Yeah, elephants. Bet you didn't expect that as the first word today. Elephants fascinate many of us. Along with the visual impact of an elephant, their social structures, their emotional capabilities amaze humans as we watch their behavior. Many of us humans could learn a thing or two from the emotional depth of the elephant world. I think today's guest would agree, as we are joined by Sandra Thompson, director of the Ei Evolution. EI, you say? Emotional intelligence. Inspired by our book 20 years ago, Sandra dove deep into the world of EI, moving from theory to actively helping businesses and individuals grasp what it means to be human. On the surface, you'd think we'd know how to be human because, well, guess what? We're human. Yet how many times have you felt like humanity is the last thing you've experienced as an employee or as a customer? Sandra believes that emotional intelligence is essential for business and personal success. She uses her skills as a coach to help people improve their emotional intelligence so that they too can be more effective in their personal and professional lives. So, how do we get to that elephant level emotional intelligence? Let's find out. Sandra, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you, Rick. It's such a delight to be here with you.
I am excited. And folks, you can tell Sandra and I are not recording from the same place in the world. We get the chance to talk to Sandra across the pond from the UK today, and I am excited about that indeed. You know, Sandra, you didn't necessarily start in the field of emotional intelligence. How did you come to realize the importance of EI and then really start to go deep into that world?
It's quite a story, in fact, and it's only when I look back and reflect on it, I realise that it was a series of interconnected events that got me to this place. I know that's always the story, isn't it? But it's actually quite fortuitous. So I started out as a marketeer. I worked for a number of years in a number of different organisations, commercial and not-for-profit, and I was continually wanting to learn. I was very lucky. I was invited to join a master's degree, and as part of that master's degree, I needed to write a thesis. Great. When you're presented with a blank canvas, where on earth do you start?
That's a challenge.
I know, absolutely. So there I was scratching my head, and I saw on my sister's bookshelf this thing called emotional intelligence. You know, this is back in 2000s. Millennium. You're talking now, and
right.
I thought, Garmin, okay, we'll give it a go. I could not put that book down. It made complete sense to me. You know, something that's as provocative as saying, do you know what, IQ might not be the answer. It might be something else. Got to read that. So that was in 2001 when I actually submitted that work. And as you absolutely nailed it in the introduction, that was all about the theory. Reading about it, understanding the academic range of literature at the time, and then I put it to bed. Can you believe that? I don't know if any of your listeners have ever done a master's degree, but how you can forget doing a master's degree is quite a phenomenon in itself.
I think that's a whole separate episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then fast forward to like the second phase, and this is when I started lecturing at a business school in central London, and they invited me to write an academic paper. There it was. Emotional intelligence has got to come back because it felt like I wasn't done with it. And also 20 years on, you can imagine there was so much more advancement in that area. So I wrote the academic paper, and then I thought, I've got to go and learn how to do this. No more theory. I've got to go and practice it. So I went off and I joined Daniel Goleman and his faculty. I popped out to Vienna over the course of a couple of years, and I learned the skill and I became a coach. Followed by that was a TEDx. And that was where I was able to apply the emotional intelligence to remote working, and also customer experience. And really from then, that's where I found my niche. So I'd like to say I've read everything. I absolutely have not. But I am still learning about what this thing is. And the practice of it, it's quite extraordinary.
Let's get into that practice part of it, Sandra. First of all, I want to react to a couple things that you said there. One, I love the fact that you can say the sentence, I popped over to Vienna. Right? For folks where I am, that's like a bucket. Oh, I want to go to Vienna. You're like, I just popped over there. So, but again, another separate episode there. But that focus on theory, like you're in the academic world, which often has that ivory tower, right? That's the term from there. And that theory of it, but really getting practical. And I think a lot of that theory is why I think EI is often viewed as this soft or kind of fluffy. Yeah, it's esoteric. It's not something that actually drives good old hard, cold business and business results. So I know you and I know that's not true, but that's a perception that's out there. So how do you help overcome that perception? How do you help explain that EI equals, or better EI, I should say, equals better business results?
It's a really interesting question because in the early days of doing consultancy in this space, I didn't actually call it emotional intelligence. There's something fascinating about the term emotional, where people either get freaked out and they go running to the hills, because that would mean being vulnerable and potentially being courageous. And equally, it's not rational. And the thing is, people have a perception, and let me say I also had this perception, that we make rational decisions. Of course, I have a list, I do the pros and cons, and of course, I'm a logical, practical thinker. I hate to tell you, everyone, 96% of the decisions we make are emotional. We just post-rationalize. And so coming back to the point about it being considered a soft skill, that's really where it's unfortunate that people perceive it doesn't do anything apart from get you in trouble. If you open up and you explain how you're feeling, it's seen as weak. But in actual fact, emotional intelligence is one of the hardest things to do, but has the most striking results. So let me share a few stats with you, because this is amazing stuff, right?
All right.
Here we go. So the Royal Air Force in the United States invested in recruiters who had emotional intelligence. They found that they were able to recruit more effectively and bring the right people in, which in actual fact, over a 1-year cycle, saved them $3 million, ladies and gentlemen. There it is. Yeah. That's one. I haven't finished yet. Wait for this. We've also got productivity. Now, we know that the essence of engagement, where people feel connected, where they feel a sense of belonging, they're more productive. They get into the zone, everything's in flow. It's been proven that people with emotional intelligence are at least 12 times more productive than those without the skill. Imagine your workforce being more productive. That's going to leave the competition behind.
We're not talking about soft, fluffy things. When you're talking about $3 million and X percentage of more productivity, that's stunning, Sandra. That I knew I believed it in my heart. I don't know that I knew those numbers that you're described. Why do you think that perception continues to exist in the face of such obvious business results that you're describing?
Because it's not easy to do. It's not the quick fix. It's not the immediate result. It's the medium to long-term investment. And let's face it, we want quick wins. Of course, exactly. And your point, your very subtle point earlier as well about building on emotional intelligence. The fact is that within your workforce, even yourselves will have a certain level of it. The extent to which you enhance it means you might get there sooner, but there are also those that might be lagging behind because they haven't got a clue with self-awareness. But it is a long game, and you have to commit to it. You have to practice these skills in order to unlearn and be more naturally able to do things that give you better connection with other humans. And that's why I think there's an excuse out there that's, oh no, it's soft. We don't do any of that flaky stuff. It's all fluffy. No, it's not.
I laugh and I pause because I want to absorb what you just said. I want listeners, I want you to absorb that, because so true, that perception. And I love how you're calling out that, look, it's perception, because it's hard. And we want to avoid it and use excuses that it doesn't count, it's anything like that. I want to get in later in the show. Actually, I want to ask you a little more practical about how we can build that, right? And if the assumption is that it is something that can be built, right? There's an assumption there, but let's go with that assumption. How do we do that? But let's talk about that later, because I want to call out, you and I met over a particular story. Classic LinkedIn example. You posted something, it tickled my interest, and I was like, oh my gosh, Sandra, tell me more about that. And you were in the midst of a really, really poor customer experience. And in fact, you kind of teased it. You didn't tell us what it was. And I was like, ooh, I can't wait to hear. Well, what was that like? I'd love you to share that story, but more importantly, I'd like you to explain, what would it have been like had the customer experience involved a greater level of emotional intelligence on the part of the company than what you actually experienced?
To start off with, I committed to a particular brand because I perceived that the quality of the product and the quality of the service would be exceptional. So everything about their marketing, their price point, everything was suggesting to me that I could rely on this company. So that's the first thing. It's really important to think about our expectations, what we're expecting to happen. And then the second part is around the reliability. And what I mean by that is we buy things all the time, but ultimately when we're making a purchase that is, we really need that thing, we are depending upon that thing in order to get on with our lives and to continue to operate. So the long and short of it is, I'd ordered a bed. I needed the bed because I didn't have something to sleep on when I moved back into my flat.
Let's get real practical.
Let's get real practical here. So when the organization I was dealing with seemed quite nonchalant and disinterested and was putting the onus on me to solve the problem and had zero understanding of the consequence of their mistake, you can imagine it, can't you? Fear, threat, anger, being let down. They haven't got my back. And worse still, what was I going to do? I had to go and stay in a hotel for a number of days because I didn't have a bed to sleep on. And when I explained to them, do you honestly want to have a woman in her 50s sleeping on the floor? I did that when I was in my teens, after parties, but I'm a bit too old for it. So coming back to your question about how would it have been different? Imagine this. Imagine, because I'd actually told them I'm moving back to my flat. I don't have a bed. So they have that information. They could have come back and said, we understand that this is a priority for you. We understand how important this is. We're going to make sure that we deliver exactly when you need it because we know that your life is busy. And here is an XYZ to help you on your way. So number one, they have understood my predicament. They've used relatable and connecting language. They have taken responsibility and accountability, and I won't be let down. I can carry on with my life, my busy life, without having to make ulterior plans because they've let me down. And it's as significant as someone telling you some fibs and then leaving you. It's a bit like leaving you out in the car lot to try and find your own way home. It's that emotionally, it's that significant. So I was writing about this on LinkedIn, as you mentioned, and I wrote about it because I was let down and disappointed. And I wanted to invite the community on LinkedIn to share what their experiences have been and what organizations can do to prevent this from happening. What I experienced was a wave of compassion and understanding, and a number of people who came forward to say they just weren't listening, were they? And in our organization, we listen very intently to all of the little breadcrumbs that get left. We ask a few more questions with those breadcrumbs to get to even more insight, and we do our very best. But here's the thing. If we're not able to do that, and some organizations can't deliver to their promises, they would have the courage to be able to say, on this particular occasion, we know that you've ordered this. We're not going to be able to deliver, but we've been proactive, and here's another bed, which no one else has slept on, it's fine. Have that while yours arrives. There's no excuse for it.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
There is no excuse for that. And I'm thinking about like that brand promise aspect that you're describing. You're not talking about, I don't know what the equivalent, like grocery store level transaction here that, oh no, my kumquat wasn't quite what I intended it to be. You're talking about a bed, somewhere that we spend, in some cases, perhaps the majority of our life in there as compared to any other place, right? And for a brand that had that elevated brand promise to disappoint you surprises me on many levels, right? And there's ample stories of that customer experience disappointment. Your description, though, of the absence of that emotional intelligence surprises me because, again, we're not talking about the kumquat example. This is something that it seems like a human would be able to understand and appreciate another human's experience there. I know I'm asking you to get in the head of another human in another company, but why do you think that didn't happen here?
I think that they were so embroiled in their own operational issues that they forgot. And the surprising thing is that when I did get through to the managing director, because I wanted to have that conversation with him, he was equally blasé about it.
Oh, now, I expect you to say something different. Oh my gosh. Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I was shocked by that. And I just thought, I thought to myself, here is an example of a organization that's doing very well, a business that's doing very well because its product is actually extraordinary. It's brilliant, luckily, but their operation is just winging it because they haven't put the infrastructure in and they haven't got the empathy and the emotional intelligence to get themselves out of those knots. And that's the thing about things like productivity, about difficult conversations, about dealing with conflict. They haven't invested in their infrastructure and their people, which means that it left a bad taste in my mouth.
I keep talking about it. I keep promising it, listeners, you're just going to have to keep listening. But I want to get into the investing and the people part of it. But something is coming to mind to me here, Sandra. It triggered when I talked about the human aspect of this. I would have expected the human. Actually, there's something else I have to react to, and that is I totally am surprised by your statement that when you talked to the director that it was different. And perhaps you're seeing something, well, that's the organization's culture, and that's a whole nother conversation. But when we talk about humanity, what's the topic du jour right now? AI, digital, right? That's so hot. It's all over my feed. It's all over your feed, and it's all over the conversation, right? I'm thinking about this conversation in the context of EI and then really the overall human aspect of service design. How are you, and I guess maybe just conceptually, but even tactically, how do you help ensure that we're keeping that humanity aspect of customer experience and the service design world in a world that's so increasingly focused on digital?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm going to answer that question in a number of different ways because it's quite a big question. So the first thing I think is customer experience. When you design it and you are intentional, that is far better. We all know that. We all know that. And if you've done some really great work in insight and you understand not just some of the basics about your customer groups, but things about their values and their beliefs, you're going to design with good intention for those customer groups. So that's great. I worry a little bit about AI on two levels. So first of all, let's cover the bit where I'm thinking it rocks. First of all, when you have a very simple request, when you want to do something out of normal hours and you can do something yourself, knock yourself out. It's
Yeah,
all brilliant. Great. Which means that it then frees up time for humans to respond to complex, messy situations that require a kind of navigation of the flow of wherever that conversation is going. There's a bit of neuroscience going on here, so just bear with me for a minute. So there's a lady called Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, who's a neuroscientist. She's out in Boston, and she talks about how every single individual experiences emotions differently. So our emotions are shaped by socialization, so how we were brought up, what our parents said, what our aunties, uncles, teachers, significant people around us said, what we believe to be true. The experiences we've had and our interpretation of those experiences. And here's the killer, the third thing, the context in that moment in time. Right. So I'm not sure, and I'm yet to be convinced, that AI has the ability to effectively be in the moment to the nuances that very messy brain is going to show up and present to that other human. Now, you're making an assumption that the human who's receiving the call from the customer has the ability to connect. That's one thing. But the second thing here is that, for example, I get on a call to a call center, I've just stubbed my toe, or I've just had an argument with a 17-year-old. You have absolutely no idea. How is AI going to be able to respond to that? It's not, right, because it has no idea. Only through really sensitive, careful, thoughtful, intelligent type perception and questioning will you get to that point. The flip side, so the second point here is, when we don't feel significant as a species, when we don't feel properly heard or understood, it sets us off. And what I mean by that is there's a bit in our brain that's really old. It's called the limbic system. It's the emotional center. And there's an amazing book called The Chimp Paradox where it talks about a chimp. Imagine a chimp in the middle of your head. If you're not feeling connected, understood, significant, your expectations aren't being met, that chimp goes berserk.
All right.
And it means that you can't think straight, your executive center isn't working. And I worry that AI's attempt to be in place of a human is going to trigger more anger, anxiety, disappointment, frustration than a human who has the skill to properly listen. I mean, look at what happens right now. When I see that I've got a bot that has as much intelligence as my dog, and my dog's quite clever, then I'm not going down that route, because I can feel myself getting increasingly angry. So in summary, number one, humans are very sophisticated, and at the moment AI doesn't meet that demand. And secondly, when it doesn't work properly, the human gets even more angry, and it thinks to itself, what is this company doing? You are pushing me out to this system that's saving you money. You're not interested in exactly what I've got to say. You're not here to solve my problem. You're here to cut costs.
Sandra, the comparison between a bot and your dog, and I don't know, I might challenge you. I might say that the dog may have a little more innate intelligence than some of the bots that I've interacted with. Got some great stories out there of some bots, as we all do. Really, it's certainly that makes me chuckle to think of those too. Now, one of the things that can be nice, you talked about popping over to Vienna, but I'm sure you've had your fair share of longer travel than that. And travel can be a bit of a wearing time. And to take a little break can be enjoyable. So I'm going to invite you to take that same break right here and join me here in the First Class Lounge. We're going to have a little bit of fun and hopefully move a little bit quickly as well. So what is a dream travel location from your past?
I can't just say one, so I'm going to say three really quickly. I'm going to say Ubud in Bali, I'm going to say Hoi An in Vietnam, and I'm going to say Havana in Cuba. Probably Havana in Cuba is the number one out of those three. Is that okay?
That is very okay. And you have made this American quite jealous, as you know, that it is either a mixture of challenging or illegal for me to travel to Cuba, although there's things have softened up a bit. So I always find it fascinating. What did you notice in Havana that really caught your eye, that made it particularly special for you?
The spirit of the place, the energy, the music, the dancing. It was kind of electric.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I'm going to have to find a way to get there as I hear more and more of my non-American colleagues telling me about how wonderful it is. What is that's for my future. What about your future? What is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
Madagascar. And it's on the list. It's on the list. It might be, I might get there next year with all being well.
Okay. What? Same question. What about Madagascar? It appeals to me, but what for you? Why?
Because it has, apparently, some of the most unique environment, species, and
nice.
I am not aware that it's yet been, dare I say this, spoiled.
Yeah, I see. Whereas you've heard of some other destinations where we see the photos of the elephants, but if you look backwards, you see just the ring of safari vehicles. And so that's good to know about Madagascar. Now, maybe we should delete this out so that others don't hear what you said. And you can What is, Sandra, a favorite thing to eat?
A Welsh cake.
I don't know what that is. Tell me more.
So my mum's side of the family comes from Wales, and she came to London when she was 15, but my aunties and my uncles all stayed in Wales. Whenever I would go and visit them, they would make me these little cakes. They're like very short scones.
Okay.
And
all right.
They are delicious.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, as you may know, Wrexham FC has gained some notoriety in the U.S. as they have been purchased by famous folks and have found themselves promoting. Now you've given me another reason to go to Wales, other than seeing a Wrexham match. Now I got to go check out these Welsh cakes, right? That sounds fantastic. Now I'm going to go the other way on you. What is the thing your parents forced you to eat but you hated as a kid?
Do you know, it's a standing joke in my family. They'll say, "We've saved these for you, sprouts." I mean, come on. Who invented those things? They're absolutely disgusting. I remember growing up and thinking, I'm sure I can hide this under my knife. I'm sure I can do that. And I always got caught and I always had to eat them. And sorry for those sprout fans out there, but they're quite disgusting.
Well, you have found a sympathetic ear in me. That's my answer to this question as well. So you and I are of a very similar spirit. Let's go back to travel and close out the lounge here. What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
So this might be another shocker, to be honest with you, Rick. It's lockable freezer bags. To be able to even get into the sea and not find all of the keys and all of your money is sodden, then lockable freezer bag inside my swimsuit, every day's a happy day.
Well, there's nothing quite like a beach or otherwise water holiday that is ruined by sodden money or any other ideas. So yes, Sandra, that is a brilliant suggestion. I hadn't had it on my list, but I think I need to add it. I promised you and I promised listeners that I wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of EI as well. So let's get tactical here. Like we talked about, it's one thing to talk about the theory of it, but if someone listening wants to grow their EI skills, how do they get started? What does an EI improvement journey look like?
One thing they could do is read a book called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's by a gentleman called Travis Bradbury. And the amazing thing about this little book is that it comes with a code at the back. You go online, you put the code in, you do a test, which will tell you how emotionally intelligent you are. And it will invite you to scale where you'd like to get to. And then it personalizes a number of exercises for you over a series of months. You take the test again, you see how your scores gone up. So that's one.
Interesting. Yeah.
With a bow on, take that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I recommend to people that I coach is to start journaling. And many of you may already do this. The act of taking a piece of paper in a book, perhaps, and spending even just 2 minutes writing something down. And even if on occasion, the people that I coach they've got complete block, they'll start by writing, Sandra asked me to write in this book. I've got no idea what to write about. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes have gone. That's it. Mm-hmm. And they have described how they're feeling, and they've described their day, or they've gone into some kind of description. Now, the reason why that's so important, Rick, is because there's a thing called emotional granularity, which is your ability to describe how you feel. And the more you practice writing, particularly, you can type if you want to, but there's definitely some neuroscience that says the process of getting it out of your head, down your arm, and writing with a pencil or a pen is quite a different experience. But your ability over time, if you're able to do it every day or twice a week, even for a couple of minutes, will grow your emotional granularity. You will be more articulate when people ask you how you're feeling. You will be more able to offer up words to other people that they could choose from. And you can also perceive more of others' behavior. Journaling is the way forward.
When I planned to ask you that question, that's not what I expected as the answer. And I love it when that happens, because I imagine listeners, you may not have been thinking that as well. And go journal. And I chuckle about how I don't know what to write. And I remember somebody saying, if you don't know how to start writing, then start writing. And that's exactly what you're saying. Just start it. But I had never thought about how that applies to that emotional granularity and helping that expand emotional intelligence. Now, I think that's a fantastic start. I want to take this, and let's close here. I want to take it into kind of the manager level. Now, the director that you talked about in your story earlier wasn't already on board. And so I'm not talking about trying to convince someone of this, but if you're a manager who already believes in this, and already knows the value of EI, how do you help them? How can they then help foster growth of EI in their own teams?
This is where I'm going to talk about two elephants, actually. I'm going to talk about
we're back to elephants, told you.
I'm going to talk about two elephants. So the first elephant I'm going to talk about is the elephant and the rider. Now, this comes from an amazing book by Jonathan Haidt, and it's called The Happiness Hypothesis. He talks about the different ways the brain works. So if you can imagine a 6-ton elephant with a rider on the top, I don't know, however many pounds they might weigh, and the elephant represents the emotional side of our behavior, and the rider represents the rational side of our behavior. Now, the fact is that you're not going to get that elephant to budge unless you are able to relate to it, to motivate it, to even be compelling with it, to give it a reason to want to move forward. So when, as a manager, you're giving instruction without a story or a reason or an emotional connection, you may as well get your coat, because no one cares, and you will struggle to really bring people on board quickly because they're just not emotionally connected to it. So that's the first thing. Get that book, have a look at it, visualize the elephant and the rider, and really think consciously about everything you're doing. The second elephant is, in actual fact, a really incredible man who I met a number of times online. I've never met him in person. He's an ex-New Zealand cricketer. He did a whole bunch of stuff professionally, and then he started exploring psychology and why people do things, why they don't do things. He's created a thing called the Emotional Culture Deck. Now, you can buy these things or you can download them from his website.
Okay.
The idea here is that you give people a set of cards, so like a deck of playing cards, and on those cards are written words like happiness, joy, misery, whatever it might be, both positive and negative implied emotion. Give those cards to the people in your team and invite them to pick the cards that describe how they're feeling right now. Then invite them to pick the cards of how they really would like to feel. and then work out the gap between the two. Because the fact is, there's this myth, right, that people don't want to talk about emotion. It is not true. People do want to be understood. They do want to help others to help themselves. And that game, that very simple game, changes the conversation completely. It builds an interest, it builds concern, compassion, empathy, and it's the start of emotional intelligence. Because once you are able to describe how you feel, you are better able to manage how you feel. And that is the first two of the 4 domains in emotional intelligence.
We're stopping right there. That was brilliant, Sandra. That is awesome. I love every bit of it. Listeners, the resources that Sandra described, we'll get into the show notes so that you can have access to that simply through the show notes, through a clickable link, so that you can have access to those tools that she's describing. Sandra, this was a delight. And I did mention, of course, folks know that we have a pre-show call. We talk about things ahead of time, but you've taken me with some surprises here along the way. And I really do appreciate that, because it means that I definitely learned today. And I know the listeners and the viewers will have learned as well. Absolutely love the conversation around how to equip ourselves to get better at EI and to help others around us. And I do hope sincerely that, one, you are never served sprouts, and that your bed serves you comfortably for as long as you have that bed, and never have an experience like that again. Sandra, if folks wanted to get to know about you, how would they get to know you and learn more about you and your approach to EI?
The best place to go is LinkedIn. So you'll find me as the founder of Ei Evolution. That's where I post very regularly, and I try as well to upload some tools, some practical things that I've created along the way that could be helpful to help people on their journey to having a happier life.
Awesome. I mean, what a great goal, right? Wouldn't that be a wonderful target for all of us? Well, Sandra, that too, listeners and viewers, will get into the notes below. It was brilliant today, Sandra. I appreciated every last bit of it. Sandra, thank you for being on CX Passport.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.